land trust separately on. It's also tax deductible as a charitable gift, although because it's a cash gift, it's a different rule than for the conservation easement. It's that 30% rule, AGI rule. But anyway, that's reported on your tax return, and you take the charitable deduction for that cash gift as well. I mentioned reimbursing the land trust for its transaction costs, for example, the baseline report, and professional fees, attorney fees, and maybe accountant fees would be the only other fee there other than those that have already been mentioned. Okay, next one.
Personal experience, I might just add, I'll share our appraisal cost. Our appraisal cost was $5,000. The professional fees, the legal fees, if you work with a good law firm like Braun and Associates, will let you pay that as they're doing the work, so it's all not on one shot of payment. So those are the two biggest expenses on it.
Okay. So what the attorney does when he's drafting this thing, the attorney who's representing you, typically the land trust has a template conservation easement that they're working off of. It's a document that they've invested in. They like to see all of their easements start with their document. You can understand that because they might have 20 different easements. They don't want to have to reinvent the wheel every time they do this. So they're going to present their template. And within that, there's all kinds of negotiation that goes on. And so in that negotiation, your attorney is looking at protecting your interests, your rights in the property to the extent that you want those things protected. If you want to give up certain rights or place certain restrictions on the property, obviously that's the point of the easement. He's being very careful, or she's being very careful, to make sure that the easement does what it's supposed to do in the end to qualify for the federal income tax deduction or the federal estate tax reduction, and qualify for that stream of income, create that stream of income. So that requires a certain understanding when you're negotiating and drafting this document. Obviously, he's drafting it with an eye towards protecting the conservation values that you and the land trust want to protect and meet their needs and goals, because you just can't say to the land trust, well, these are my demands and you have to meet these. This is a partnership, okay? So it's something that you're working out with the land trust, and they have certain way of looking at your property. They're trying to accomplish certain things. To the extent that those things intersect, that's great. And to the extent that they don't, that's what you have to talk out. That's what you have to figure out. And there's myriads of details in every conservation easement that you need to look at very carefully and make decisions about. And that's the process that your counsel leads you through. Go ahead. So these are the types of restrictions that we're talking about here. The right to subdivide, the right to build additional buildings, types of commercial activities that you'll allow in the future, agricultural grazing activities, mineral development, hunting, fishing. You can just run down this list and see there's a lot of things to think about, okay? And there's a very systematic process that we go through when we're doing this. I'll just highlight one or two real quick. If you're getting money from, say, the federal government, from the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS, they have money to purchase easements. Well, they might have a certain set of restrictions that go along with that money. So anytime anyone's plunking money down, that's a little bit harder thing to negotiate, all right? If you're given a gift, it's a little bit easier. Sometimes we can't figure out, a set of restrictions to last forever. Gosh, that's a mighty tall order. So we'll create certain management plans or development plans and say, in the future, we'd like to develop this portion of the property. We don't know the details yet, so we're going to say, these are the general parameters, and we're going to leave that to the parties to figure out down the road. But this is the general parameters under which we would allow certain parts of the property to be developed. Okay? Or these are the management practices that we think are appropriate for this property for protecting the conservation values. So those are parts of the conservation easement sometimes that are negotiated out, drafted, and attached usually as exhibits to the conservation easement. Okay, last slide. So the result after the easement is the land trust conserves what's important to it: habitat, scenic views, and it does so at a very low cost. Okay, the land trust can't go out and buy these properties to protect them, but they can work with like-minded landowners who want to protect the conservation values at a much lower cost. And the landowner creates a legacy. I think Ken's a good example of that. They They save taxes, both income, estate, and capital gain taxes. They're still able to use the land, usually in the way that they've used it, you know, all the time they've been on the property, they're still continuing those uses. The land continues to appreciate, it's still marketable. Now you've done something that's lowered the fair market value of the price, so obviously if you turned around after you put the easement on it and tried to sell it, you're not gonna get the full value that you would have if you didn't have the easement on it, okay? But there's some research out of Colorado that indicates that as time goes on, what's actually happening is the reverse. That people are willing to pay more for eased property because they're looking for bigger pieces of land when everything around them is getting chopped up into 2-acre tracts. So we don't know where this is going, but for the time being, it's pretty clear that you sell the property, you can expect to receive a lower fair market value because of the easement, but in the long term, that could change. What you have to do is at least get through the first 3 years, because that's when the tax return is subject to audit, okay? So that's when we pop the champagne cork 3 years after the thing is recorded and done. And what you've done with the easement is unlock the development potential of the property that you had not planned on using anyway, and turned it into a stream bank. So that's my presentation. I'm here for questions. I'm sure Ken and others are available for questions and answers if you'd like as well. Thank you.
Once you decide to do it, how long does the process usually take? Or,
Well, that depends upon you, and how committed you are, how much time you can devote to it. And you know, landowners are very different. Some are very hands-on, and some just say, you know, call me when it's done so I can sign it. But the shortest I've ever done one of these transactions is 60 days. And that's going full bore to knock everything out, get the appraisal done. The appraisal usually takes the longest, and the baseline documentation usually takes the longest. Those are the things that take maybe 60, 90, 120 days to get that piece done. So if you're trying to get something done by the end of the year, this is about the time when you should be in serious discussions about it.
We don't do any more workshops after July on conservation easements, because we expect that, okay, if you're serious or you want to explore it further, we'll need to come talk to you. I'll be handing out some evaluation sheets. I'd like to get your contact information and your impressions of the workshop and additional questions, so we can go out and visit with you if you want to talk more, and we can follow through. But if you're thinking about the end of the year and you're seeing this kind of little window of time is important, then this is the time to continue with discussions.
Ours took about 6 months, and we didn't waste any time in that 6 months.
Yeah, that's the typical amount of time.
Do land trusts normally have any insurance requirements, special insurance
No.
requirements to be carried on the property?
No, I haven't seen any. Brent, have you had?
Not on the property. Now, we carry D&O insurance, you know, directors and insurance, you know, for our board of directors. But in terms of the property, it's your property. And the only, now there is a move in the works for land trusts to consider actually coming up with a legal defense insurance. That some land trusts are now looking at the idea of banding together and doing that. Because for right now, what most land trusts do is develop their own, you know, defense fund. And it could cost from $50,000 to $60,000 to defend an easement. And so you'd want your land trust to have at least enough to defend an easement in that little legal defense fund.
Let me just mention that every conservation easement has some sort of indemnification clause where you're indemnifying the trust and they're indemnifying you. They bring their people on the property and somebody, you know, breaks a leg because the land trust people get, you're not liable. Similarly, if you do something really dumb, you know, you set the shotgun on the tripwire or something like that, and you hurt someone, then you got a problem, and you're not able to get around that. But typically, you see that negotiated in the conservation easement itself.
does the land,
Go ahead. You had your hand
Oh,
raised.
this would just be an estimate. What would your estimate be of the reduction in fair market value of a property in western Kerr County?
I have no earthly idea.
Because I know you were giving some ranges, you know, 25 to 70.
No. Here's what I typically do. You know, if someone's interested, this is one of those kind of threshold questions that people have. So you have to find an appraiser. They have to come out and take a look